You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison.
Hey, Justin.
How are things going?
Pretty okay. Nothing like acutely terrible.
That's good to hear.
It is. I mean, it's as far as standards go,
Right.
Sean's had a cold for like 2 weeks.
Oh.
Which is a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
And then his esophagus has started to tighten again.
Oh.
So then last night he tried to like swallow a cold medicine capsule and then it got stuck and it's just terrible. So yeah, there's that. But we did not, I think we had a whole week where he had no appointments. Is that possible?
Oh,
That might
wow.
be true. Yeah. So that felt awesome.
I bet.
Yeah. Just felt like we're kind of trying to crawl out of the hole a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, doing pretty okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. How about you?
Things are going all right. I had a good day yesterday.
Yeah.
Went and found a rare swan in the morning. So that was cool.
That sounds beautiful.
Sarah and I had a great day kind of working on some projects and doing some stuff. And it was just a nice day yesterday. It felt like a good day, which is cool. I had lunch with a friend. And so it was just...
Look at you.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
A swan, some projects, and lunch with a friend all in one day.
Big day.
That's a big day. Good for you.
Yeah. So that felt good.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah. So I was thinking we've talked about appointments a bit ago, going to medical appointments, and we didn't really get into like when those don't go well.
Oh, yeah.
As far as whether it's the medical staff is like, whether they're rude or short or just like not great.
Yeah.
Not great bedside manner, or I don't know, maybe just the whole vibe of the appointment doesn't go well. Maybe we don't get we don't get what we came in there for.
Sure.
The expectations weren't met, and just kind of how we feel in the moment there, how that feels afterwards, how we can kind of like not let that go necessarily, but like, because that kind of thing can kind of stick with you and you're just kind of like, ruminate on it.
Sure.
Which isn't necessarily always helpful, I don't think, in the long run. So does that sound like a good kind of...
Sure does. Yeah.
Thing to talk about?
Yeah. And it's funny because when we had sort of talked about this a couple days ago, I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I'm sure I've got some experiences with that. And then when I started last night, like listing them in my brain, I was like, oh, this is a long list. So fortunately, it sounds like I have not been ruminating on them. I have filed them away. But I also think this, we're going to like open up a little Pandora's box here today, because like these are really hard moments, and I think that a lot of that lands on us as the caregiver, as like the advocate, as the person that like, are we going to do something about this? Like, do we need to like tell someone or fix it, or, you know what I mean? So I just sort of want to, I feel like this might be a little like a therapy session today of opening up, like, remember that? So I know I have a long list, but do you want to start?
Okay.
Do you have any?
I have one that definitely stands out.
Okay.
And so this was early in Sarah's being sick, I guess. I don't know what to call it. When she was the migraine, the constant migraine was the like dominant symptom at the time, or what she was dealing with. And we were seeing a headache specialist he was great. He was fantastic. And trying a bunch of stuff. And so we were at a point, and there was a chance it could have been this one type of headache. And there was a procedure we could have done to kind of verify that. And it wasn't like, it was maybe a little unlikely, but like we figure we're trying to solve this. We got to turn over every stone.
Yeah.
So we got an appointment at the hospital it's an outpatient procedure. And we went in. And I remember we had to wait a long time because the doctor that was going to do the procedure, I don't know if he was in surgery or something, but it just like we were waiting a long time. I remember that. And then he came into the like little curtained off room, and he just did not want to do the procedure.
Yeah.
And he was like challenging why we were even having it done. He didn't think it was necessary. And we're just like, do your job.
Yeah.
Like, these are the like orders we have from another doctor. This is your job to do it. Like, why are you being so like
Right.
obstinate? And we had to like convince him that like, no, we do want this done.
Right.
And that just felt so like that shouldn't be on
Right.
us to be advocating for that when it's like, it's on the like papers, the chart, the
Yeah.
whatever, do this thing.
Right.
And we know that it's, you know, we know the like risks. We know that it's not like this is a little bit of a long shot
Sure.
as far as if this is what's going on. But it was just, it felt terrible
Yeah.
to have to like, one, deal with somebody who like wasn't wanting to help us.
Yeah.
When like you go into these medical appointments to get help, to get answers,
right,
like these are the people who can potentially unlock what's going on.
Yes.
They have that knowledge,
Yes.
or have access to that information, or can find that information.
Right.
And when they're just like, no, I don't want to help you.
Right.
It was the worst.
Well, and it's not like I can imagine a doctor being like, this is really risky.
Yeah.
You know, are you sure of the risks involved? Like that kind of hesitance, right? But it's not like that's what it sounds like was going on here. It sounds
right.
Like it's not like he was concerned for her safety.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I was thinking about that, I don't know, yesterday when I was thinking about this, talking about this, like, yeah, he could have said most of what he said in a very different manner.
Yeah.
And outside of the, like, I don't think you need this, but like some of the stuff, he could have approached it in a much more like, I just want to make sure you understand everything and like are aware of all this stuff, and be like, that would have been okay.
Sure.
But it very much felt like, I don't know, maybe he just had a long day in surgery and just wanted to go home. It kind of kind of almost had vibes like that.
Right. Like I got a golf tee appointment and I got or whatever.
Yeah.
How did she end up having the
Yeah, she did. Mm-hmm.
So how did it feel then sending her off with this man who didn't want to do it? Like, was there, what was the emotion of that of, you know, because even if he was like super awesome, it can be scary to send our loved one off with a person. Right. But if he was like not all in, what did that feel like to you?
Right. So the procedure happened in the little room, or the little curtain off room.
Okay.
And so I was there.
You were there. Okay.
I was there during it. So it wasn't like I had to send her off. So I think that felt good to be like there with her during it, because it was also very painful for her to the procedure. So, but yeah, as I remember, he kind of like, once it was like, yes, we're doing this, he kind of calmed down, I guess, for lack of a better expression. Like he didn't continue that once like it was time to actually do the procedure. But yeah, it's just, it shouldn't be that way. And it feels like, I don't know, like you're not believed, like you're not being seen for what you're going through.
Yeah.
Just to feel like they're being so dismissive. It just, it feels gross.
Well, and also sounds like you had one doctor saying one thing and then another doctor saying a different thing.
Yes.
And then you, without a medical degree, are in the middle being like, well, which one's right?
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like this I think, and sometimes my brain can be like, well, this person has a degree and a lot of background and experience. So maybe I should be listening to them. But also I know my person better than anybody. So which one wins?
Right.
Right. His medical degree or my knowledge of my person. Because they're both important in their own way. Right. Yeah. And so I imagine in that moment, you're like, well, this doctor said it's a good idea, but then this doctor's saying it's not a good idea. So who do we listen to? Right.
And thankfully I feel like it wasn't too much of that, because like her headache doctor was like, we trusted him very, very much. He was very, very knowledgeable and very skilled. And so like, it wasn't like, we didn't doubt that he was, that piece of it, thankfully. So it was just like, hey, we got to convince this other guy to like, yes, we want to go forward with this.
Right. Yeah. So some of the threads I'm hearing from that, like one is the being late piece. And I think that like they're, medical professionals are like notorious for this. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think the piece of this is like, they're humans. And, I'm sure that there are times that like doctors have been working on Sean and it's taken longer. And I'm glad that they gave us that extra time.
Right.
And then, of course, that snowballs. And then everybody else for the rest of the day is late, right? So they're humans and they're in a system that's broken.
Right.
So I think we need to like acknowledge that. But also, like when you're sitting there waiting for a procedure or waiting for an appointment where you might, like you said, unlock an answer, like the anticipation in our bodies as the caregiver and as the patient is huge.
Yeah.
And so to wait and wait and wait, like is just like a thing. Right. And so I think that's a big one.
Right.
So I think the waiting, and then I think the piece about, like you said, not being like heard and seen and sort of respected is another piece. And it's like, I don't know. It feels like we're supposed to sort of go in and like bow down and be like, okay, yes, whatever you say. Whereas like really they're there to like serve, sounds like the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like us, like we're the customer.
Yeah.
Right. But it doesn't always feel like that. It feels like we need to be like, okay, whatever you say and whatever. And it's okay that you're late. If I'm too late, you're going to cancel your appointment. But if you're hours late, nothing happens, you know?
Yeah. It's like, I think about when doctors or staff that is like great, it's very much, it's not the like, I'm the one who knows everything and like, whatever, pay homage to me. Yeah. whatever it is. But it's very much like, it feels like they're a teammate.
It's a collaborative.
Exactly. Like they're coming alongside you. They're like, we're going to figure this out together.
Yes.
Like feels great.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So actually I want to insert a good story.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Because that's making me think about an appointment Sean had recently with a new infectious diseases doctor. And we were bummed because the woman we had before was amazing, but now she doesn't see patients anymore. So we had this guy and he had clearly spent a long time with the chart.
Oh, wow.
This epically long chart.
Yeah.
Right. And had like done his research. And like that right there was so huge. And then like that word collaborative, like there was a lot of like, well, I'm kind of thinking this. What do you guys think? Or I've seen this. What would it feel like for you if we tried? You know, like it felt like, okay, we're bringing this expertise of his lived experience. He was bringing his medical experience. We both brought what we had to the table and we could have a discussion together.
Yeah.
As opposed to this sort of battle of like, you know, who gets to be heard or who this, or who's, you know what I mean? Like, and it was just like, oh, and at the end I said, thank you. Thank you. I told him, I said, clearly you spent time preparing for this appointment.
Right.
And I'm really grateful for that. And he was just like, oh, well, sure. You know, I'm like, yeah, I wanted to be like, you're very rare. So like the flip side of that, of course.
Yeah. Right.
So Sean used to see this doctor who specializes in Fanconi anemia.
Okay.
And in the end, we fired him.
Oh, wow. Like that's a thing to specialize in a disease that rare.
Right. So he's like I'm not going to say which disease group because, you know, but he's in a specialty. Yeah. And then within that specialty, he is the FA specialist, which is a big deal, right? Yeah. Like these people don't exist. And it doesn't matter. Like in the end, we fired him. Like it was not worth it. Because every time we went, he was hours late.
Oh my goodness.
Hours. And then we would be sitting in the room and I would be like, don't make small talk with him. Don't do it. Because what would happen is he would just take the topic, whoop, off he'd go. Pretty soon he's telling us about, he went to Guatemala and he took a picture of this tree. And I'm like, friend, that is not what we're here for.
Right.
So Sean and I would like prepare ourselves. Like, okay, when he comes in, don't say, how are you?
Right.
Like, don't make any small talk that might distract him.
Wow.
But even so, he would off, he would go. And then same thing, it felt like he like never quite, like, was he even paying attention? Like he was so focused on his stories that like, is he watching? And then one time he was like, here's this like rinse, this like sinus rinse. You should try this. And then we went to this other appointment afterwards and that doctor saw that we had the sinus rinse and was like, oh yeah. So, you know, when you do that with the distilled water, I was like, what do you mean distilled water? And he was like, well, you can't use that with tap water or it would blah, 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 blah. And I was like, this other guy didn't tell us that. Like if you hadn't just seen this bottle sitting here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we went to the schedule and we're like, yeah, we're done with this guy. And they're like, well, but he is the expert. And I was like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather have someone who's not the expert, who's going to like take time be with us, like pay attention. And you know what I mean? Like do that part of their job well. That actually means more to me than who cares if he's a specialist, if he's like not really paying attention.
Yeah, there's multiple things there. Like one, being so late all the time, like that. One, just waiting in a medical setting is never an enjoyable thing, especially when your person is sick and like they're not comfortable.
Yes.
Like I remember there was a period of time where when we would have an appointment, like we would ask if there was an exam room she could lie down in instead of waiting in the waiting room, just because she like sitting for that amount of time was exhausting for her.
Yeah.
So like waiting is a nightmare.
Yeah.
But yeah, then to just like so easily just ramble off topic and just feel unfocused on like why you're there. Like you carved out this time in your day to get like you, Allison and Sean, to get direction or answers or something. And you have been waiting for an extended amount of time. And it's like, okay, let's go. Here's this. Because appointments do feel like these, like I have this, whether it's like 20 minutes or something. Yeah. And we gotta get through it. We gotta get through this amount of time. Because also, I don't know, maybe this is true for me. I don't know how it feels for you. I don't want to be the one that's like stretches the appointment out so long that then other people are late. I think about that, which I know. Yeah. I don't know if that's healthy or not. But it feels like it's this window. There's stakes involved. Yep. It's like and to just like, have him spend so much time on his own stories. Like it feels like maybe you're in the wrong career. Right. Like maybe you should be like a storyteller. Right. You know? Have a podcast. Right.
Well, you're right, because especially with anybody in a medical appointment, but like especially with our people where like there's a lot of mysteries and a lot of hard stuff. Appointments feel like a fork in the road. Yeah. You know, you're going to get this answer, or you're not going to get an answer. You're going to try a new thing, or you're going to find a result, or whatever. It's like that appointment is the thing that's going to decide what happens next for your person. Yeah. And that's high stakes. Right. And so I think it feels like for us, like you've been watching for this date on the calendar and like we're finally there. And to see that the other person is like not taking it seriously like that, because you're just like one of a billion people they're seeing that day. Feels awful. Yeah. So another one that was like this was that Sean, after he had his bone marrow transplant, he was on steroids for a long time. And then that caused avascular necrosis in both of his hips, which is basically his hips like broke down. Right. Yeah. So we had this appointment. We thought this is what was happening. He was all kinds of pain. It was hard to walk. We got this ortho appointment. It was on the books, but it was like way out. So we were like waiting for this appointment. And again, big deal for us, right? Like finally the day came. That guy, he was like hours late. He walked in, had clearly not read the chart, like suggested some things that I was like, he can't take that because he has bad kidneys. He's like, oh, I don't know, had not read the chart. And then was like, well, I can't help you until we get this x-ray. So go out to the scheduler, make an appointment for the x-ray, and then make another appointment with me. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like you could have told us that so that we could have done that in these 3 months we've been waiting. So we walked out of that appointment. Because I think this is a big thing for us to think about today is like, what does that do to us as the caregiver? When this appointment goes badly, we're the advocate, right? So how do we handle it? Right. So I walked out of that appointment and in the lobby, it had like a suggestion box. Oh, basically. And I was like, I just sat right down. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff on this page, put it in the box. But then I got home and I was like, that was not enough. So I called too. Okay. And I just said like, look, this is what just happened. This is not okay. And the sad thing is that they were basically like, yeah, we get that all the time. Oh. And since then, I have met other caregivers in Minnesota who have had the same guy and had the same thing happen. And I'm like, what? Yeah. You know, so it's like, well, clearly, right? So what about that piece about how like we see something really hard happen for us and for our person. And then we have to decide like, how big do we go? Do we just like fill out a suggestion slip? Do we call the front desk? Do we go to patient relations? Like, do we call the media? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do we do with that information? And what is our responsibility on top of all the other things we're doing? Right. Like, when a medical professional doesn't do their job right, like what does that do for us? Like where do we land, you know?
Yeah. I think initially, like you mentioned, like we're the advocates. And so when it doesn't go well, I think it can feel like we failed. And I don't think that that's not true. Like there is a person who is not on board with helping you in this situation. And so like recognize that and don't put any responsibility of that on yourself for not advocating well. Like,
sure.
But then as far as the piece of like, what do you do with like, as far as feedback, I'm very much the kind of person that like, I'm very non-confrontational and it feels like a real stretch to be like, maybe a comment card, like, and it would not be a scathing review.
I was gonna say, I could hear it. Very passive aggressive, potentially.
Potentially, yes. But I do, and again, like for us to have to be the ones to provide that feedback, like that's another thing we have to do, especially if it's like a phone call, because like you got to find the right number then, because that's probably not a number that's like on the
right. They don't want you to find that number,
right? So it's like you got to call it like, this is why I'm calling, and it's like okay, and so like, I don't know, maybe you spend time on hold, and it's just like, I don't know. For me, back when we were in all that, I spent enough time calling, scheduling stuff that like I didn't want to have more of that.
Totally,
it's terrible that that's another thing to put on our plates.
But then if you, go ahead.
But it does also, and maybe like you've had a lot more, it sounds like you've had a lot more negative experiences, and probably that's just because you have had many more encounters with the medical system. Like, you know, you encounter humanity enough, you're going to have terrible encounters. You encounter the medical system enough, like, it's just part of humanity, you know, in some ways. But if nobody ever says anything, nothing's ever going to change.
Right.
But unfortunately, in your case, it sounds like people are saying things
and still not changing,
and nothing ever changes. Like then it feels like, what's the point?
Right. Well, and then to decide, like in that moment, and this is what we did in that moment too, is that I was like, we're not going back to this guy.
Yeah.
I guess he's a brilliant surgeon. And of course you want your person to be with a brilliant surgeon.
Yeah.
Right. But you also need them to be good to you when you're awake.
Yeah. Right.
And you also need to know that they have read the chart. And so in that situation, we were like, we need a different person.
Yeah.
But then that's a little bit of a crapshoot, because what if the next person
you don't know,
right? And so that's what just feels like, And so I think part of it too is, I'm thinking of a caregiver who listens to the podcast, who has said before that she has decided to give herself like 24 to 48 hours to like calm down a little bit, because sometimes she feels like in the heat of the moment, she might not be thinking clearly.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that that's wise, of course.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
But at the same time, I think that if we give ourselves too much time, we might be like, oh, maybe it was fine.
Yeah.
You know, because there was a time when Sean had an outpatient procedure and the entire day felt like a disaster, including that there was a torrential rainstorm that day and the waiting room started leaking. Like rain was like literally coming in the waiting room. I was like, are you actually kidding me right now?
Wow.
And like,
that's a bad omen.
It was bad. And like thing after thing after thing. And I think if any of these one little things had happened, it would have been fine. But in the end, I ended up writing an email and there were 19 things that happened that day.
That's a specific number for you to remember.
It's true. Yeah. I remember that. And this was years ago. 19 things. And I remember then one of the things was that, and this kind of haunts me a little bit, but is that like, so then he found when he was like, you know, home, one of those little like stickers on his back. Do you know what I mean? Like one of the, you know how they put the little stickers on you for like the leads for the,
right.
keychain. Like they had forgotten to take a sticker off. Right.
Okay.
Not a big deal. But for me, at the end of that day with 19 other things, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. And so I remember I took a picture of that as well. And I like had this list of 19 things, including the picture. And I sent it to like the patient relations department.
Yeah.
But I remember the thing that haunts me is that I remember a doctor of his saying later, like, I showed that picture to so many people. And I think that what she thought was that I was ridiculous. Like, I don't know why she decided to tell me this.
Yeah.
But I think about this all the time about how she said that. Then this was probably like 10 years ago.
Why would she say that to you?
I don't know. But that she's like, I just showed that picture to so many people and I just thought it was so funny. And I'm like, you don't understand. And I get that if like that was the only thing, like,
yeah.
But that was the 19th thing that happened in that one day, you know? So I remember that patient relations like wrote back and like line by line, you know,
right.
tried to like, but they basically were just trying to like placate me, you know?
Yeah.
So then it's like, was that worth my time and energy? You know, and even there for a while, I was on the patient relations like committee at the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Like, but then it was like too triggering because then I would have to like go to the hospispittal for the meetings. And I was like, I don't want to be in this building. What am I doing in this building? But maybe for like a year or so, I was like on the patient relations, committee because I was like, I'm going to make change. But it's like, really, is that another thing we're doing?
Yeah.
Fixing the medical system?
Yeah.
So I think there's that piece of like, are we going to be taken seriously? You know, like this doctor laughing at me for having that picture of the sticker.
Yeah.
Like, do they think like, oh, she's just like being ridiculous, like she's being emotional, she's being like whatever. And so then there's that kind of fear of that. But at the same time, like, it's our person.
Yeah.
And so of course those 19 things all felt huge. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because like we are there with one person, like for our person, and like this is the whole thing, and we're just a part of their day.
Yep.
But it feels like they should be able to give us, I don't know, at least their full attention and like be more or less on time, and I don't know, just get more out of that encounter than we do sometimes. And it feels weird because like, you know, nominally, like, I don't know, we're the customer and we're paying them and they're working for us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the way that dynamic plays out is so different than any other like situation
industry
where we're paying for something and getting a service in return. And I don't know why that is, but the dynamic feels very different.
Yeah. I know. I'm trying to think that like if I scheduled a haircut.
Yeah.
Right. And like I can't cut my own hair. So like I have to go to this person who knows how to do it. Yeah. And if she was 2 hours late or if she was rude or if she didn't listen to me, I'd be like, absolutely not. I'm never going back here. And I'm going to tell everyone not to go here.
Right. Or you are in a situation and like you talk to the manager or whatever, and you get like a discount on your next thing.
Right.
Like that'd be great.
10% off your next surgery.
Right.
I have gotten like a free, like one of Sean's procedures. It was hours and hours late and they gave me free parking.
Okay.
Which, I mean, it was something. It felt a little like, really? But I mean, it's like $9, so I guess I'll take it. But still.
Yes. Yeah, right.
But you're right. So like, what is that? The difference there that like you said, we're at one point, you said like, we're paying homage, that we're like, okay, doctor, whatever you do. Like, is it because there are so few of them? Like, especially in these specialists kind of situations. What is it that makes it so different?
Right. I don't know if it's the fact that like they have the knowledge. Like there's something about, I don't know, medical stuff is a mystery and they're the ones with the key. I don't know. I don't know where that dynamic comes from. If it's like something, I don't know. That'd be interesting to like look into the like societal or whatever, like the history of that and like where that comes from. I don't have an answer to it. It just that it feels weird and I don't love it.
Well, because I'm thinking anything like a car mechanic.
Yeah.
Same. Like I can't do this thing, so I need you to help me. But if you're 3 hours late and rude and don't listen to me, I'm never coming back.
Right.
And maybe there are people that do that. They go to the doctor once, it's terrible, they don't come back.
Yeah.
I want to mention that I'm realizing as well that you and I are in bodies where we're actually like very privileged, right? And that there are a lot of people who show up, especially in people of color, who like it's a whole other thing of not being respected and not being taken seriously and not being, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
So we've got like probably the best case scenario, you and I,
right. Mm-hmm.
of a broken system. And there's many, many people who are dealing with way more layers
Right.
than this.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just important to acknowledge that as caregivers, like so much that we're carrying. We haven't talked about backpacks for a while, but I've been thinking about that. We used to talk about like a backpack and all the different rocks, right, that are like weighing down our backpack. So it's even if the appointment goes beautifully, right? That was a lot.
Yep.
For us to schedule it and get there and sit there and wait and then go through the thing and then talk about the stuff and like that's a lot. But to do that and to put all your sort of like eggs in this basket of this appointment and then have it not go well,
right,
can just feel like a lot. And then to feel like, did I do something wrong? Should we have gone to someone else? Should I have said something differently in the appointment? Should I, like, I always sit there wondering, like, how many times should I go up to the counter and say, like, we're still waiting.
Right.
And I think, and Sean has said before, he feels like one of the reasons, I mean, he's just like naturally very sweet.
Yeah.
But he also like, he thinks about like, if I'm kind to these people, they will treat me better.
Right.
And if I'm rude and I complain about things, are they going to be like, well, forget you? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they going to not treat you as well? Which is terrifying.
Yeah. Right. So then you have to like filter through, okay, what is my response going to look like? Because I have to, that's going to
receive care from these folks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of layers.
So many layers.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think another way that appointments don't go well is maybe it's not necessarily to do with the specific how the interaction with the medical staff goes, but like you go in looking for an answer or you go in hoping for a particular thing and your expectations just aren't met. Like I can think, for example, like when Sarah was working through getting diagnosed with fibromyalgia, like it felt like we had a couple different encounters with, like, one I think was a rheumatologist, and it's a weird thing where rheumatologists diagnose fibromyalgia a lot because it's so similar to things that rheumatological stuff.
Sure. Okay.
But they don't then necessarily treat it.
Okay.
So like we went in and it's like, yes, I think this is what you have, but like I don't treat that.
Oh.
So it's like we get an answer, but it's like, okay, now we got to figure out
a
new thing. We need to find somebody else. And so like that just feels like, I guess it's good we got an answer, but like now I got a whole other thing. Instead of like, here's someone to see, like that would have been okay.
Right. And let me help you schedule that.
Right. And I feel like we had a kind of a similar experience, like when we were trying to, I don't know if this was before or after that, but we were trying to like really confirm, okay, does she have fibromyalgia? And like, what's the plan? Like, what can we do to help that? And we got an appointment. I found that there was like a specialist down in Seattle.
Yeah.
And so, made this appointment, and it was, it was a ways out to get the appointment. And at this point, I think this was in the period where we're at, like, Sarah can leave the house once a month for an appointment, I think.
Yeah.
So it's like driving, normally we're driving maybe 30 minutes to an appointment.
Sure.
Now we're going to be driving like an hour and a half or more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big shift. So like the stakes are high there. So, and we get to the appointment, and first off, like the bulk of the appointment is not with the doctor that we had scheduled for. It was with his like assistant, like still a doctor, but like someone working under him. Yeah. And that just, I don't know. Not that, I mean, she was fine.
Yeah.
But it just felt like we wanted to see the expert.
Yeah.
We wanted to get the input of the expert.
Right.
So that was kind of like, didn't feel great. And then like he's like, yeah, you probably have fibromyalgia, and kind of like, here's kind of some stuff that your doctor can try. And it just didn't feel like we got an expert level plan out of that whole experience.
Right.
Because I think it was after that, I think it was maybe 3 months before Sarah could leave the house again.
Ugh. because of that one day.
Because of that, how the
Yes.
exertion of that one day. Because of that, how the
Yes.
exertion of that one day. So it's like, it wasn't, I mean, the staff was fine.
Right.
But it didn't go, we didn't get the answers we wanted, or like what we got out of it didn't meet the work that we put into it or something.
Yes.
And it's just like, it feels kind of, it's deflating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just like, okay, now I have some more information, but it's not the, like, the answer, and you know, in a lot of cases, you know, there's not necessarily the answer.
Sure.
But I don't know. We were hoping for more than what we got, I think.
Yes. I think about that all the time, and about how, like, for you both, that was like a huge day.
Yep.
I mean, I think about that when I sit in that terrible, like, surgery waiting room. And I'm like, for each of these caregivers sitting in this room, this is a huge day.
Yep.
And I get that for all the other people who work there, it's just like another day of work.
You're right.
But I think that I wish they could remember that this is like one of the biggest days of our lives. Right. And that, like, I wish that, like, the providers that day could have understood what a big deal that was for you that day, you know? Yeah. And I don't know if there's anything more they could have done or done differently.
Right.
But I think just for practitioners to realize, like, this is not just like run of the mill for us. Like, this is, we are putting our hopes in this, and we put a lot of time and energy, and the repercussions of us, like, putting the exertion into this appointment. And sometimes the financial repercussions of, like, paying for this specialist are huge. So, like, give us your best. You know what I mean? And how can they remember that? And how can we maybe have a little grace to be like, they're busy and they have 17 people a day. And you know what I mean? Like, again, it's like the system is broken, but how can we both see each other better? Both sides see each other better, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other piece is when they say something insensitive.
Oh, yeah.
Or dismissive.
Right.
You know? And I'm thinking about, like, most recently when, you know, Sean had his esophageal cancer diagnosis, and we were in this like terrible waiting time, and we were just like not well, right? You know, emotionally, like, as we were waiting for this. And so we had this online appointment with one of his providers, who's typically awesome. But, and I'm sure I've talked about this here, but, like, I was like sitting there on the screen, like tears like streaming down my face, and he, like, never acknowledged, never stopped to be like, Allison.
Right.
And he knows me well and all the things. Never stopped to be like, I see that you're crying. Well, can we talk about, you know what I mean? Like, nope, none of that. And we, like, logged off, and I was like, F-. He gets an F- today.
Yeah.
And there are some providers that I feel like we have and I haven't done that with this one, but, like, we have enough of a relationship with that I can say, just so you know, here's how this felt, or just so you know, for the future. Right. Because we've at this point kind of, like, curated our team of, like, gotten rid of some people and kept people. But sometimes you're just like, I don't want to have to do a follow-up email with you and recommend, you know what I mean? I just want you to, like, do your job.
Yeah. Yep.
No. Is that so much?
Yep.
To ask?
Yeah. Well, and you just talking about, like, you've curated your medical team. Like, that's a whole thing that you as a caregiver had to take on, because that's most of the time we don't know who or what we're getting.
Right.
We don't necessarily always get a pick who we're going to see.
Right.
Like, you get a referral to a specialist place, and it's just, you're going to get one of the doctors there. Right. And it's a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
And so then if it doesn't go well and you got to find somebody else, like, that's more work for you. And even just, I'm thinking about knowing that these things might not go well, knowing that we have to, like, make sure to advocate, or just the feeling that we might have to, like, really emphasize something, that this is what we're looking for, or really be like, no, this is what we want to do.
Yeah.
Like, feeling that going into it.
Yeah.
Like, that we're carrying something, we're holding something, like, that tension sits with us, regardless of whether, even if the appointment goes well.
Yeah.
Like, leading up to it, we still had all of that.
Yep.
Like, I don't know how to describe it, but that just, like, feeling it and preparing for it and just like running through scenarios in our mind.
Yeah.
That takes something out of us.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there are some things, again, I hate to say like, here's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that we know that if we go in with a list of questions, a list of this, even a mind chart message beforehand.
Right.
Potentially that says like, here are some of the things that we're going to want to talk about at the appointment. Like, are there things like that we can do? And again, I wish we didn't have to. Yeah. But that we could do, beforehand to sort of help with that, And I think, this is part of what I'm trying to do at the negative space is like painting the picture, like speaking to medical professionals about like, this is what this looks like. This is what it took.
It feels like. Yeah.
To get us here. I spoke to this amazing oncologist recently who is really into like taking care of caregivers. And he's doing a study where he like he's like researching how much time do people spend at the clinic and like even looking up their address to figure out like how far they have to drive and figured out that on average, like a simple lab draw is like 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
From like door to door.
Yeah.
And he was like, you're probably not surprised by that, but we were. And I was like, no, I'm not at all.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to figure out like this like time toxicity, that is spent at clinics. And so I think I'm glad somebody's thinking about it because that's a piece too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What about our supporters?
Right.
How can they help us or help in general in these?
Yeah. The first thing I thought of when thinking about this is a time to listen and validate what a caregiver is telling you. So if a caregiver is venting about how the medical system has been treating them or a bad experience, listen and validate that. Don't try to come up with reasonings why it went the way it did. Saying, well, they're busy. Well, they probably, like that's not helpful in that moment.
Yep.
Listen and validate their experience.
Yep.
Like that's your job in that situation. I think that's a big one.
It's huge.
And I guess the other one is fix the medical system.
Yeah. Supporters, could you just get right on that?
Yeah.
Could you just please fix the medical system for us? Thanks.
Right.
Guys. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if they have the energy, right? They have more energy than us, likely. And so what are the things that they could do? Like, even if, like, because patient relations, that is a thing, right? Like every place has a patient relations department. And so could it be the kind of thing where like the caregiver gets to just vent and say, here's all the things that happened. And the friend, the supporter, is the one to, take those notes, write something up, figure out where the patient relations department is and just send and say like, hey, does this look okay? And then send it off. Right. Like do that behind the scenes work on their behalf.
Right.
Or if I say like, we went to this orthopedic surgeon, he was the worst, we're firing him, have a friend of ours, like, could you do some research on who else is, who are the other orthopedic surgeons we could use? What are their reviews? What are their, like, what is that, all that logistical stuff that we have to do that maybe they could do on our behalf?
Yeah, that's good. I think, it's a very unique one, but you mentioned that you were on the like patient relations committee. Having a non-caregiver, but someone who is plugged into caregiving would be that'd be helpful to know that you have a voice and an advocate there. That's a very specific thing.
Sure.
But I don't know, maybe there's other instances where you can be a voice for that.
Right.
And if you're in the medical system, think about these things.
Yeah.
Understand what it took to get us there.
Yeah.
What we're carrying into it. And listen to us. Yeah.
And even if you don't have the answers, right? Because we don't want you to make it up.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
But to acknowledge, like, I'm really sorry that today we don't have the answers. Here's something I can do to help you move down the road towards the answers or something, Right. I think, again, back to the supporters about recognizing that appointment days are a lot, even if it goes great.
Yeah.
And so to say something like, hey, do you have any appointment days coming up this week? Could I bring you dinner that day? Could I walk your dog? Could I pick your kid up from soccer? You know what I mean? Like, lighten the load.
Yep.
The logistical load, knowing that that's happening.
Right.
And I think supporters often, especially if it's a big appointment, I think friends and family can tend to be like, what happened? How'd it go? What'd you find out?
Yeah.
Right. And to be like, just let them share if and when. And if you hear the caregiver say like, oh, they didn't really give it, well, don't jump into like, well, did you say this? And did you do this?
Yes.
And what, you know what I mean? Nope.
Yep.
Nope. No.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. What do we, quick before we go, what do you wish, you said this a little bit, but like, what would a amazing appointment look and feel like?
Yeah. I think if the caregiver, patient, and the doctor, if there was like this is a weird thing, but like a set agenda for the meeting, like you both knew this is what we're going to go through.
Sure.
And you kind of alluded to, maybe you can send a my chart message ahead of time that's like, these are some talking points. Or when you because you always wonder when you make the appointment and I'm making it for this thing, like how much of like the reasons you're making the appointment make it to the doctor.
Sure.
Or maybe they make it to the doctor, but they don't have time.
Right.
They don't make the time
to
read that. So like that would be great.
Yeah.
2, it's just that really feeling like we're working on this together.
Yeah.
Feeling seen in the magnitude that this thing has on your life and the person you're caring for's lives.
Yep.
Seeing the stakes that are involved with this, with being there. Like being honest if they don't have an answer, but like, keep looking, like, we're going to, here's something that we can look into this. We can, here's a specialist or whatever that we can talk to. That kind of thing.
Yep.
I mean, it's a weird example, but we had an appointment with Mosey's vet the other day, and we were talking about some medication stuff. And the vet was like, I'm going to have to do some research on this. I went to a conference and there was this expert on this, and I'm going to call them and I'm going to get some input from them on this.
Whoa. That's amazing.
That felt amazing. To feel like I'm invested in your case.
Yes.
I am going to do some legwork.
Right.
And become more informed myself.
Yes.
And yeah. So like, I don't know.
That's
things
huge.
like that. Yeah.
Yes. That Sean's dermatologist did that recently, that I had been asking him some questions at the previous appointment. And at the next appointment, he said, so since I saw you, I did some research and I found out that this and this and this and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, and because you just want to think that, like, even to know that they're like thinking about you and like that it's more than this like 12-minute slot that they like walk in, barely look at the chart, give you some information and leave. Yeah. And so to know that they're like doing the work behind the scenes. Yeah. And thinking of you is huge.
Right.
Huge.
Yeah. That reminds me. Yeah. That reminds me of like one of the great experiences we had, which is Sarah's previous primary care doctor. We had an appointment and she brought up this study on this particular medication for people with ME. Yeah. And like, hey, we should try this. Yeah. And it wasn't something that was on our radar. And it was something that another patient had brought to her. And she was like, hey, here's this other patient I have. I should share this information with them. Yeah. And that was the thing that made such a huge difference for Sarah. So like, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. For them to be thinking of us. Yeah. Right. In other settings and like throughout the time. And again, like, oh, this would be helpful for them. Yeah. Because I think it goes back to like you and I have talked so much about like we feel like we need to be doing the research. Yes. And we're not the experts. So for someone else to be like, I did the research, I thought of it, I'm going to try this. Here we go. It's like, oh, thank you. It's just like taking all these rocks out of the backpack.
Right. And maybe they do that and more often than we know. I mean, probably not. But like to hear it, to know that they did it. Yeah. That's a real key piece of that, I think, because it's someone else is helping to carry that backpack. Yeah. Absolutely. We're taking a rock out of it and like, hey, I'm going to carry this one.
Yes. Right. And really they should, because they're the ones with the degrees.
Right.
Makes a lot more sense for them to be doing the medical research than us.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Okay. All right.
How do you feel after that?
I feel all right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I feel okay.
Good.
And it's good that I feel like that most of these are not recent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have curated this team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we know the people. And so, but yeah, it is like, ooh, there have been a lot of just experiences in general. But yeah, a lot of not good ones too. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good to talk to you. We'll do a support group on this. And so listeners, watch for that, because I'm sure people are going to have lots of stories.
Mm-hmm. If someone is just hearing about these support groups, how do they find out about it?
Yeah, good question. So you can, if you go to my website, thenegativespace.life, there's a place where you can sign up for alerts so that I send you an email every time that I schedule them. You also, if you're following along on social media, either the In Sickness podcast or Neg Space Life, I post about the support groups, but they're typically are like a weekish after the podcast comes out. So
cool.
Yeah. So I'm sure this will be quite a conversation, because I do not think you and I are the only ones who have had hard situations like this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good.
I also, one last quick thing is I know that sometimes we, unfortunately, a lot of the people that we know who are caregivers at some point lose their person, and then are like, what can I do? Like the often I see that they're like, I really want to help. And so it just made me think about that a little bit, about that, like being on the patient advocate board or whatever. And maybe that's not what you want to do with your time. But if you are a person listening who's like, how can I help now that I do have more time, and how can I share my story? That might be a way to is like helping in that way, because I'm sure you've got lots of stories from, so yeah.
Yep.
All right. Good to talk to you, friend. Talk to you. Talk to you soon.
Great. Okay.
Sounds good. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.